This specimen of high-tech muscle is known as a champ car. The number 29 car competes around the world in races that draw as many as 300,000 fans. Believe it or not, a champ car's radical performance is helped by carbon.
They are open wheel, single seat, open cockpit race cars, similar to Formula One. They're capable in the current aerodynamic configuration and horsepower of about 225 miles an hour. They make about 3,400 pounds of downforce. What that means is the car could drive upside down and hold itself to the ceiling because it makes so much downforce. A champ car will go from 0 to 100 in 2.6 seconds and then back to 0 in the same amount of time. So basically you can go from 0 to 100 to 0 in about 4 seconds.
To hit speeds up to 225 miles per hour and take sharp road race turns at up to 165 miles per hour, it helps to have a 750 horsepower engine, high-performance tires, an obsessive crew, and a really good driver. But it's the car's body that we're interested in. It's made of a super strong, super light material that has revolutionized the world of motorsports: carbon fiber. Carbon fiber is one of the latest incarnations of that simple element, carbon, that gives structure to all living things and helps other things go faster. The main body section, called the tub or monocoque, the front and rear wings, the body panels, the driver's safety harness, even certain engine components are made of the rather nondescript, even flimsy-looking stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see in, but I mean, pretty much the entire thing's carbon. In fact, there's really not much I can see from in here that isn't carbon.
Why are all Formula One, IndyCar, and Champ Car racers built with carbon fiber?
It's 10 times stronger than steel and 3 times lighter in most instances. This is the engine cover from the current Champ car. And as you can see, it's very light, and it's all because of carbon.
When the margin of victory can be a fraction of a second, every pound counts. And the only thing more important than speed is safety.
From where I'm sitting, for sure, the reason for a carbon fiber would be its strength. The all one-piece carbon fiber tub is really very safe, and people walk away from some pretty nasty accidents.
Driver Catherine Legg learned the value of carbon fiber firsthand. During the 2006 Champ Car World Series, Legg's car smashed into the wall at 180 miles per hour. Though the car splintered into dozens of pieces, Legg was unhurt. Her life was very likely saved by carbon fiber.
Some of these crashes at 200 miles an hour plus, there's no way a human would survive if the car wasn't absorbing a lot of the energy. Aluminum won't absorb that, steel won't absorb that.
Unlike metal, which crumples around the driver at the moment of failure, carbon fiber breaks away.
It's very good for absorbing energy and not transferring it to the driver. These cars are designed to break away, and when parts break off these cars, they take energy with them. So instead of that energy transferring into the driver and hurting the driver, the energy goes away with the part as it leaves.
Carbon fiber manufacture is as difficult as it is secretive. But the Zoltech Corporation is opening the doors of its Abilene, Texas factory for a rare look inside its operation. One of the strongest engineering materials in the world begins as a synthetic petroleum-derived fabric, not unlike nylon or polyester.
We're standing here at the initial stage of the oxidation process, which typically stabilizes the man-made material, or the polyacrylonitrile. We call it PAN for short. The PAN material, as it's drawn into the first oxidation oven, begins to cook. And as it cooks, as it's drawn through this oven, the material starts to change color.
What you're basically doing is driving off a lot of the other components, and the more carbon you're left with, then the more black the material appears to be.
The slow burn causes oxygen from the air to bond with the carbon atoms, which go from a linear chain to a stronger ladder-like formation. After the stabilization process, the fibers emerge as a very strong 68% carbon material, known as pyron.
At this stage, this material can be used to create a brake for an airliner.
Although pyron is tough enough to stop an airplane, turning it into 100% carbon fiber calls for a lot more heat.
This is one of our high temperature furnaces where we complete the carbonisation of the fibre. We have a total of 5 altogether, and in this furnace we drive out the remains of the hydrogen and nitrogen to bring us up to a full carbon fibre. This is really the most critical part of the process, because the temperature that we use defines exactly the modulus or the stiffness of the fibre and also the tensile strength. So it's very, very important that we keep really accurate control of the furnaces at this stage of the process.
This time, the fibers are heated in the complete absence of oxygen, so that they won't burn. Instead, the extreme heat forces the atoms to vibrate until the non-carbon atoms break away. Left behind are crystalline chains of carbon atoms. The carbonization process has now fused the carbon atoms into a very strong shape that will require great energy to break. The carbon fibers go through an electrochemical bath, which roughens the fiber surface and makes it more bondable for use in composites. Then, in a last step resembling a textile factory, the carbon fiber is wound onto bobbins. The fibers, each one about 1/10 the width of a human hair, can be cut like any thread. But when bundled into a cord 50,000 fibers strong, they begin to flex their muscles. But how does carbon fiber go from this to this? First, the carbon fibers are woven into a fabric to provide multi-directional strength.
That fabric is then draped over a mould of the vehicle itself, and they will apply resin to it and heat the whole thing up in an autoclave and cook it.
The autoclave cooks the carbon fabric into a hard shell, with its shape determined by the mold.
When you think about how it starts, to oversimplify it, it's a piece of rayon like what's in your shirt. And when you put it in an oven and you bake it and you do it right, you get something that can survive a 200-mile-an-hour accident, and the guy gets up and walks away.
Of course, carbon fiber isn't just for auto racing. It's making its way into high-performance consumer cars and the strong light blades on some of the world's largest wind turbines. But the most dramatic use for carbon fiber is on Boeing's new passenger jet, the 787 Dreamliner, which debuts in 2008. The fuselage and wing structures are made almost entirely of a carbon fiber reinforced composite.
The important thing about the carbon fibre is its strength, and its lightweight, and its corrosion resistance. Those are the 3 key drivers. So the actual Dreamliner will be much lighter in weight than if it was made out of metal, and that's increasing the fuel efficiency.
That will mean more affordable ticket prices, even as the cost of fuel goes ever upward.
Back in the early 70s, Boeing estimated that every kilo you took off the weight of an aircraft would save something like $100,000 in fuel costs over the lifetime of the aircraft. In those days, oil was $12 a barrel. Today, the saving is potentially very much greater.
While other airplanes must keep a cabin pressure equal to 8,000 feet above sea level, the Dreamliner, with its stronger airframe, will be able to maintain a much more comfortable 6,000 feet equivalent. And since carbon fiber will never corrode, airlines will be able to provide a more human mix of air in the cabin. No more dry eyes and throats at the end of a long flight.
It's taken 50 years for it to finally reach a new aircraft. But the Dreamliner will be the most fuel-efficient aircraft flying, and that's what carbon fibers was all about.
Of course, carbon fiber is just a fraction of what carbon provides us. Try to imagine a world without carbon, or even a champ car without carbon. You can forget about the fancy hydrocarbon-derived paint job. You won't be able to stop without the carbon brake pads. But that's okay, because you can also remove the methanol fuel, the rubber tires, the car body itself, and last but not least, the carbon-based life form at the wheel. Just about everything that counts on this car and in this world is made at least partially of carbon. Carbon is crucial in forming the bonds that make up living things and the stuff that certain living things like to make.
Carbon is the most abundant element in the universe that forms solid structures. Of course, hydrogen and oxygen and helium are more abundant. Carbon forms structures. As a matter of fact, it's a very unique element. It's an enchanted element.
The key lies in the configuration and size of the carbon atom.
What makes carbon so versatile is two things. Number one, the amount of electrons that it has in its outermost shell, which we refer to as the valence shell, is 4. And it's also in the first row of the periodic table, which makes it a very small atom.
The carbon atom's 4 valence electrons bond with larger elements, such as metals, as they give up electrons, and smaller elements, such as gases, as they try to gain electrons. As a result, carbon forms an amazingly broad range of compounds.
In fact, today there are probably over 10 million known carbon compounds.
The most stable carbon-to-carbon bond is found in diamond, a crystalline lattice of pure carbon.
Diamonds have extreme hardness because the carbons that exist within diamond have been compressed under extreme pressure over billions of years to form this interlocking network of tetrahedra. And this interlocking network of bonds between carbons makes this extremely, extremely hard material. In fact, the hardest naturally occurring material known to man.
Carbon, with its unique bonding capabilities, is also the key element of living things. Thus the phrase carbon-based life forms.
Carbon is an ideal chemical element to be just stable enough to make the stuff of life and the chemicals with which life does business, but just unstable enough that it doesn't cost too much energy to get that chemistry going.
It's this ideal combination of stability and reactivity that makes carbon the backbone of all living systems. With carbon providing the critical bonds, simple sugars become complex molecules like DNA. It's truly the element of life. Carbon-rich plant life of the prehistoric variety has proven one of our most powerful sources of energy. But can we find ways to burn it without increasing global warming? The Antelope Valley Station, a 360-foot high power plant in Beulah, North Dakota, more than anything else, is a really, really big boiler.
Where we're standing is on the roof of Unit 1 of the Antelope Valley Station. In the background is the Unit 2 of the Antelope Valley Station. As designed in the late 70s, this was the largest boiler in physical size anywhere in the world. We're physically standing on the tallest building in North Dakota.
North Dakota's tallest building is here because of what was left here a long time ago. Carbon. Lots of it, trapped in a bounty of prehistoric life.
Between 50 and 250 million years ago, North Dakota and this region was a huge inland sea. There was a tremendous amount of vegetation that grew up from that. And over time, that vegetation grew and then died and got covered and compressed.
Over millions of years, layers of sediment compacted the vegetation into peat. Eventually, the pressure, combined with heat rising from the Earth's mantle, broke down the peat into a black carbon-rich substance we know as coal. The Antelope Valley Station gets its coal from the nearby Freedom Mine, the largest coal mine in North Dakota. 16,000 tons each day are crushed into a fine powder, ready to enter the pair of 33-story boilers where coal does what it does best, burn. As it burns, it releases energy in the form of heat, held in the tightly formed prehistoric carbon bonds. The 2,600-degree heat is used to boil 14,000 gallons of water, about half a swimming pool per minute, into high-pressure 1,000-degree steam. The steam is forced into turbines, which spin fast enough to turn this 160-ton shaft. visible only at this small gap, 3,600 times per minute, generating 500,000 horsepower.
Everything on this facility is here to make sure that the shaft rotates at 3,600 RPM.
The electric current generated from the power plant's 2 turbine decks is enough to power 360,000 homes. For all the talk about America's addiction to oil, the nation's energy infrastructure is truly built on the bedrock of coal. The U.S. has by far the world's largest deposits of coal, thanks to the swamps and tropical forests that covered much of eastern North America about 300 million years ago, and the vast inland sea that covered what are now the Great Plains 100 million years ago.
It's not only domestic, but it's a plentiful fuel. There's hundreds of years available for use. In fact, half of the country's electricity is produced from coal, so it's a very important fuel for us just from that aspect.
In China, 82% of the electricity comes from the burning of coal. In India, it's 70%. Coal also fueled the Industrial Revolution. Large coal deposits in England and America powered the age of steam, locomotives, steamships, and factories. Steelmakers learned how to turn coal into a cleaner burning, pure carbon fuel known as coke, which supplies the tremendous heat and carbon atoms needed to turn iron ore into steel. But our planet has paid a heavy price for a century and a half of coal usage. Coal causes more pollution per unit of energy than any other fuel. Its more dangerous particulates include mercury, arsenic, and sulfur dioxide. And as the most carbon-rich of the fossil fuels, coal is the #1 emitter of the global warming gas, carbon dioxide, producing 1/3 of all human-caused CO2 emissions.
When you burn something, you're combining it with oxygen. So when you burn a material that's made of carbon, what happens is you rapidly combine it with oxygen. So one thing that happens is you get carbon and oxygen together.
Reducing coal's carbon dioxide emissions will be a daunting task, but not impossible. Next door to the Antelope Valley Power Plant is the Great Plains Synfuels Plant, which uses an innovative technique known as coal gasification.
Coal gasification is a very unique process. The gasification plant here is the only plant of its kind in the United States.
Inside the 14 gasifiers, high-pressure tanks each weighing 165 tons, a precise combination of heat, pressure, oxygen, and steam causes the molecular structure of the coal to break apart. The hydrogen and carbon form pure methane, or natural gas, while the principal product, methane, is piped off to be used as a heating fuel. Other compounds, such as ammonium sulfate, are captured by smokestack scrubbers and used to make fertilizer.
I think one of the unique aspects of this plant is that this is a chemist's dream.
Unlike coal combustion plants, which release a more jumbled mix of emissions, the Synfuels plant can separate, capture, and compress its carbon dioxide emissions. This CO2 waste stream is sent through a pipeline to these depleted oil fields in Canada. Here the CO2 is injected many hundreds of feet below the surface into porous rock formations, which trap the CO2 permanently. It's called carbon dioxide sequestration, and this expensive technology is just getting started. Meanwhile, the world's CO2 emissions are growing every year, due in large part to the increasing use of coal. But another carbon-based energy form is also on the rise. Instead of prehistoric plant energy, it harnesses living plants and the remarkable ability to remove carbon dioxide from the air.
Well, plants are the ultimate recyclers of carbon for us in the biosphere. Without plants, no animal life would be possible, because what plants do is take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and they use the energy in sunlight to fix that carbon dioxide, make it into part of the plant's structure.
Most of a plant structure is composed of cellulose and hemicellulose, complex chains of sugars that form the strong fibrous tissue that holds a plant upright. For 3 decades, a handful of scientists have labored to turn those cellulosic sugars into ethanol, a biofuel that's powering more vehicles every year. Unlike corn ethanol, which ferments only the starchy grain into alcohol, cellulosic ethanol would use the entire plant, virtually any plant.
The good part is that there's an awful lot of cellulose out there in the world, hundreds of billions of tons, literally. What's bad about it is that Mother Nature designed those plant cell walls, designed the cellulose molecule, so that it's not very easy to take the cellulose apart into individual sugar molecules.
But thanks to advances in technology, especially in the enzymes and other compounds that break down the cellulose into fermentable sugars, scientists and entrepreneurs have figured out how to replace a fossil fuel, oil, with a living fuel, cellulosic ethanol. There are many environmental advantages to cellulosic ethanol. Unlike corn, cellulose-heavy crops like switchgrass thrive on marginal lands and require little or no pesticides and fertilizer, which are generally derived from fossil fuels. The result? Cellulosic ethanol crops have a net energy return 10 times greater than that of corn grain.
Well, switchgrass is native to the United States. It was one of the grasses, in fact, it was the dominant grass in the grasslands that covered the Great Plains before the settlers arrived. It's a C4 perennial grass, means it's very good at fixing carbon dioxide.
Being a perennial grass, its roots continue to sequester carbon dioxide in the soil, even after its stalks have been harvested. Now it's a question of economics. As scientists and industry continue to knock down the price of the enzymes and other technology, they predict that within 10 to 15 years, they'll be producing cellulosic ethanol for under $1 a gallon.
If we do this right, if we pay proper attention to how we build the systems, we can have fuels that are inexpensive, that provide environmental benefits, lots of environmental benefits.
For better and for worse, humanity has changed the landscape and the atmosphere with carbon-based fuels. But to really make our mark, we reach for a different carbon tool. Take the pure carbon atoms inside a diamond. Change their rigid lattice into a stack of loosely interlocking sheets. And you transform the hardest known material into one of the softest minerals on the planet, graphite.
Here's graphite in its solid form, and you can see that the top of this is very flat, representing where the top sheet would be, so to speak, of the graphite layer. And all the layers that are beneath it are very loosely held together by these intermolecular forces. And the intermolecular forces that are easily broken allow these sheets to slide.
Anyone who's used graphite to open a sticky lock knows that the mineral's slippery structure makes it a good industrial lubricant. Even more so because it can withstand extremely high temperatures.
In the steel industry, they'll use it to lubricate doors, as the doors have to slide up and down. They use it for crucibles that you would fire items in. It's in brake shoes lining. Bearings are actually made out of it. On the bottom of the space shuttles, it comes in those black tiles that hold the heat back as the space shuttle comes back in. That's actually made out of a graphite product as well.
But graphite has made its name literally, with a wonderful ability to leave a mark. At General Pencil Company's factory in Jersey City, New Jersey, a dedicated group of pencil makers turn graphite powder and blocks of cedar into the world's most reliable writing instrument.
We are still the oldest pencil manufacturer in the USA, still family-owned and operated by the original founding family. And we're still in this brick building 100 years later.
Making a pencil begins with a mixture of graphite, carbon powder derived from coal, and a smaller amount of clay. Increasing the percentage of graphite makes for a softer, darker mark, while more clay makes a harder, lighter mark. A 750-pound mix of graphite, carbon, clay, and water are fed into this ball mill filled with river stones. The ball mill churns the ingredients for 24 hours until they form a smooth, homogeneous slurry. General Pencil pumps the slurry through filter presses, which screen out the water and form the mix into manageable sections, known as cakes. The cakes are left to dry for 48 hours.
We want to dry it real slow so that they dry evenly and the outer surface doesn't crust. If it should crust, that's going to be a scratchy spot in our lead later.
Pencil makers and the general public still use the term lead to describe the pencil's graphite writing core, even though pencils have never contained lead. The misnomer comes from the fact that ancient Romans, Greeks, and Egyptians wrote with a tool called a stylus, pencillus in Latin, which was often made of lead. The modern-day pencil traces its origins to the discovery of graphite in 1564. But perfecting the pencil took 3 centuries of innovations, many of which are still used by General Pencil. After the carbon cakes are pulverized to a very fine powder and recombined with water, the mixture is ready to be extruded into the pencil-shaped cores, or leads.
He's packing it in our packing ram, and what he's having to do is get all of the air out of there, just like you would make a clay figure in school. If you have air in it, it's going to explode when we go to fire these. Okay, John's loaded up our cylinder, and now for the first time, the actual mix itself is going to take on the shape of a pencil lead. The lead is going to come out of the die here and pass through our cutter wheel. And as the lead comes through, these blades will cut it to length, and that die is what's actually going to give us the shape of the pencil lead itself. Once the pencil cores are extruded out and dried, they're placed into the crucibles which we're actually going to put into our furnace. On top of the crucible, we pour a packing graphite to make sure that the oxygen doesn't get down to leads, the cores themselves, to burn out that carbon.
While the 1800-degree furnace stiffens the leads, over in the woodworking area, the pencil shell begins to take shape. First, a saw cuts 8 grooves into each slat of cedar.
We use the cedar because of its straight grain, and cedar allows for smooth sharpening as well. And of course, everybody loves the smell of a freshly sharpened cedar pencil.
The graphite cores are glued into one slat and covered with another, forming a sandwich. Once dried, the slats are cut into round or hexagonal pencils.
We make a hex pencil and a round pencil. Traditionally, a hex pencil was made so simply it would not roll off the desk of a child.
The pencils are then sanded and painted, fitted with a brass eraser holder, called a ferrule, in case you were wondering, and the erasers themselves. They're also stamped with letters or numbers that indicate the pencil's degree of hardness versus blackness, the HB scale.
With 1 being the softest, 2 being soft and leaving a nice dark mark, and 3 being slightly harder, and 4 being extra hard.
The number 2 pencil also happens to leave a mark that's easily read by optical scanners. That's why, beginning in the 1960s, every student has had to bring a pair to take a standardized test. The number 2 is but 1 point along a wide scale of pencil options. To get a fine light mark, an engineer might use the number 5H. An artist seeking bold black lines would reach for an 8B.
One of the benefits that a pencil has over a pen is just by the pressure of your hand, you can change the texture, the darkness, the lightness, the tone, the imprint, where a pen just isn't going to be able to do that for you.
Graphite works by leaving itself behind. But another form of carbon is unparalleled in soaking up other stuff. And it's keeping your air, water, and even your feet fresh and clean. In the hills near the Kentucky-West Virginia border, the Calgon Carbon Corporation makes a black, granular, utterly unremarkable substance that may have already saved your life. This substance is the key component of gas masks, poison antidotes, air purifiers, water filters large and small, and literally hundreds of other products. It's known as activated carbon. Carbon naturally has strong bonding capabilities. In activated carbon, this ability is greatly extended by the addition of microscopic pores. The internal pores give activated carbon tremendous surface area and make it the most adsorbent material known to man.
1 teaspoon of activated carbon has the surface area of an acre, and 1 gram of activated carbon has the surface area of a football field.
With its ability to adsorb dangerous chemicals or undesirable tastes, odors, and colors, activated carbon may be the most useful thing you'll never see.
I was trying to think about how many times a day a person might come in contact with activated carbon, and I think I got exhausted after I got through like breakfast. When you take a shower, the shampoo and the soaps probably have chemicals in them that have been purified with activated carbon. There are components of the toothpaste that have been purified with activated carbon. To have a cup of coffee, well, if it's decaffeinated coffee, activated carbon has been used in the decaffeination process. You may have purified the water that you're putting with the coffee, and the sweetener that you use has been purified with activated carbon.
How does carbon become activated? At the Calgon plant, the world's largest granular activated carbon plant, it begins with crushed granules of bituminous coal, a hard low-ash variety. The coal granules go into a rotating 120-foot baker.
The primary purpose of the baker is to take a sized coal particle and to heat it up in a very controlled fashion such that the volatile matter is removed from the coal particle, and the total heating process takes the material from an ambient temperature to roughly 800 to 900 degrees F.
The baking process leaves behind pure carbon, which is fed into the activating tower. The 90-foot tower is a kind of complex furnace. Precise inputs of steam and oxygen feed a roaring blaze.
The material is heated up to roughly 18 to 1900 degrees F in the presence of steam. What we're looking at is the bottom hearth of the activator.
The steam penetrates the carbon particles, burning millions of tiny pores, creating channels that will be used to adsorb undesirable chemicals. The carbon, now officially activated, is cooled, screened, and loaded into containers ranging from 1,000-pound bags to 20-ton tankers. There are dozens of different-sized activated carbon products designed specifically for different types of impurities, and whether they're air or waterborne. But the principle is pretty much the same.
Methylene blue is one of the colored solutions we use to measure pore size in carbon. So it's a fairly common test on activated charcoal or activated carbon. Okay, so again, you can see the carbon bed stops about here. Methylene blue is above it. So we'll just drain the colored solution through the carbon bed, and as it goes through, the carbon removing the blue colored molecules from the water.
Activated carbon's ability to remove color makes it indispensable to food and beverage manufacturers, who use it to make beer clear and sugar white as the driven snow. But activated carbon's most important job is absorbing dangerous chemicals from our water supply as it passes through a water treatment plant.
And as the water actually goes through a granular bed of carbon, the carbon is pulling out those organic molecules, whether it's molecules that cause taste and odor in the water, or maybe even some potentially harmful molecules that are pesticides or herbicides.
Since activated carbon does not kill off microorganisms, treatment facilities use chlorine to sanitize the drinking water supply. Carbon filter technology has trickled down to home water filters, which use activated carbon to remove further impurities and the taste of the chlorine. Sure, it's important to have pure air and water, but what, you may ask, can activated carbon do for my smelly feet? Thanks to the work of Dr. Herbert Lapidus, the inventor of odor eaters, you're in luck. Odor Eaters were the first product to tackle the odor-causing bacteria that thrive in the sweaty, confined environment of a shoe.
Just think of your shoe. You have provided the bacteria with a magnificent growth media. And worst, it's trapped in your shoe. There's no place to go.
To absorb the bacteria, the Lapidus process relies on activated charcoal derived from a surprising source.
We use activated charcoal derived from coconut shells. It's a higher quality and more expensive, but I was interested in small amounts, so I was looking for the very finest, and NASA had come away with the coconut shell base as the best activated charcoal you could get for clearing air in space capsules.
But the breakthrough was in Odor Eater's delivery system.
You can't just take charcoal, dust it in the shoe, and let people walk around with it, so I knew that couldn't work. What you have in Odor Eaters is activated charcoal embedded in this breathing, porous latex foam. Every time you walk, you express the air. It's like a bellows effect. You walk on it and the air moves, and so the air with the odor moves through the latex, which has the activated charcoal embedded in the latex, and the activated charcoal picks up those odor molecules.
The design worked, and for millions of people suffering from extreme foot odor, and those around them, the results have been anything but trivial.
Marriages were breaking up because they couldn't take off their shoes at home. The wife wouldn't wash their socks.
Once again, it's carbon to the rescue. New forms of carbon are protecting valuable space vehicles and may someday form a ladder to the stars. We now return to carbon on Modern Marvels. This truly space-age technology is known as an aerogel. Nearly weightless, with tremendous surface area and heat shielding capabilities. Aerogel has already been used to capture particles from a speeding comet and to protect valuable equipment from the intense radiation of space. And scientists are just starting to explore this stuff. An aerogel is similar to an aerosol. It's a dispersion of liquid or solid particles in a gas. But in an aerogel, the particles have bonded together.
So that's why aerogel, even though they're like 99% air, they're still considered a solid.
A handful of aerogel has the same surface area as about 2 tennis courts. And yet a wafer of aerogel weighing only half an ounce can support the weight of a brick. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory put these remarkable qualities to work during the 2004 Stardust mission, which sought to understand the composition of comets. Stardust used a collector made of porous silica aerogel to capture particles of the comet Wild 2.
So as these particles hit the aerogel at a very high velocity, 6 kilometers per second, they basically just crushed the aerogel network, and in doing so created a track into the aerogel. So it was basically slowing down as it embedded itself in the aerogel and eventually came to a stop.
The next generation of aerogels is made with carbon. Carbon aerogel begins as a clear cocktail of organic chemicals, which are combined with water.
They all react to actually form a gel, and this is actually what the gel looks like here.
The gel then goes into a high-pressure oven called an autoclave, which cooks off everything but pure carbon. Carbon aerogel delivers the same porosity as silica, but brings better heat insulation. A wafer of carbon aerogel weighing next to nothing can do this. Such lightweight insulation makes carbon aerogel an ideal material to protect the Mars rover vehicles from the harsh radiation of space.
This same type of material is also going to be used on the Mars Science Laboratory rover, which will be going up in a few years.
Scientists plan to tap another of carbon's virtues, strength, to revolutionize space travel. Currently, there's only one way to escape the Earth's gravity. But rocket-powered liftoffs are expensive, not to mention dangerous. Today, scientists are inching closer to an outlandish-sounding alternative known as the space elevator. It would consist of a cable 62,000 miles in length, tethered to Earth, with a counterweight circling the Earth just outside of geosynchronous orbit, higher than 22,240 miles. The centripetal force of the anchored tether working against the counterweight's orbital speed would keep enough tension on the cable to allow cargo to be lifted along its length and into space.
Space elevator is a fascinating idea. Why hasn't it been done before? Because with current materials, the weight of the cable would make the cable collapse to the Earth.
But there is one material that could work: carbon nanotubes.
Carbon nanotubes have a unique combination of properties. They are tough, they are strong, they are 100 times stronger than steel at 1/6 of the weight.
Carbon nanotubes are nanometer-sized particles of graphite in which the bonding structure has been radically strengthened. If this represents one layer of graphite, this is a carbon nanotube. The super-strong particles are assembled on the nanoscale over and over again to form life-sized structures. Suddenly, the idea of a space elevator is not so outlandish.
With nanotubes being, again, 100 times stronger than steel and at 1/6 of the weight, this appears to be feasible, and NASA is really investing in this idea.
And that's just one application for carbon nanotubes. In the years to come, you can expect to see them greatly extending the battery life of handheld electronic devices, acting as molecular-scale semiconductors in smaller, more powerful computers, and providing a super-strong biocompatible material in replacement joints for us carbon-based life forms. Carbon is the little element that could, and does, form the lightest, strongest, hardest, softest, most absorbent, most useful, most dangerous, and most interesting things on this planet.